These are the scenes that have dominated some of the headlines. Lazio fans saluting Mussolini on the streets, and also during the game, fans brought with them bananas, chanting "Bakayoko, these bananas are for you." Lazio released this statement saying Lazio is distancing itself clearly from the behaviour and protests which do not in any way respect the values of sport supported and promoted by this club for 119 years. And the club rejects and contests the simplistic tendencies of certain media who consider the entire Lazio fan base as co-responsible for the acts of just a few isolated elements which are motivated by anything but a sporting passion. The club have always fought for respect of the legality and correctness of its fans' behaviour. Paolo with us. Paolo, how's all this gone down in Italy?
It's been big news. It's been in front pages of all the papers, and there's been a certain amount of the same reaction you get every time there's instances of sort of, I guess, high-profile racist abuse in Italy, which is a lot of condemnation and very little tangible action. A great sense, to be fair, of people saying, well, what are we supposed to do? We don't know what to do, basically, holding their hands up and saying we don't know how to fix this problem. And there's an extent to which you have to accept it's a societal problem, not just a footballing problem. Football cannot, for instance, stop the first part of what we just saw, which is people from congregating in a street and holding up a banner to Mussolini. They could be wearing Lazio shirts or they could not be wearing Lazio shirts. The fact is it's outside a football stadium, so you can't control people's behaviour in that arena. I think you could certainly turn back on that Lazio statement and say, well, okay, maybe it isn't the majority of Lazio supporters, but it's certainly a very persistent and present minority who have been guilty of offences against, in particular, the Jewish community for years, going back to the 90s and beyond. And has the club, if it is really saying, look, there's just this minority of protesters, there's this minority of difficult people, has the club done enough to identify and eliminate them? If they're a smaller group, as the club would like you to believe it is, then surely that should be a very achievable goal. And I think that sort of, unfortunately, that sort of last line of the statement, that sort of constant turning it back to, hey, don't blame us, is indicative of something. There's always this desire to say this is somebody else's fault and not take responsibility for it. Yeah,
that's the thing that certainly struck me from that statement. It was like, why are you focusing on these idiots when all the rest of them are being nice? It's like, well, wait a minute, you're responsible for everyone as a club, and inevitably, if your fan base, no matter how many, bring bananas purposely into a match to then abuse a black player, this is something the club should address straight away and not kind of dance around it by, but look, everyone's behaving over here.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of this, again, I would argue in Italian society and culture politically, unfortunately, as well as in football, this idea of, oh, well, we might have done something wrong or someone associated with us has done something wrong, but look, they're doing something wrong too, and it isn't just us, or it isn't us who's responsible. There's a lot of this sort of desire to make sure the blame doesn't fall on you rather than actually attempting to address the problems, I feel like. And you could talk about even what happens in the context of the match itself, and afterwards Leonardo sort of waited a day, director at Milan, obviously, before coming and talking to the press and expressing his disappointment that the game wasn't suspended when Bakayoko was being abused, and pointing out that subsequent to Kalidou Koulibaly being abused by Inter fans in a game earlier this season, they did change the rules with regard to the referee's powers to stop a game. The referee in Italy does now have the power to suspend a game and bring all the players to the centre circle at the first sign of racist abuse. And he was saying, well, why didn't that happen? Now, look, in fairness, I'm willing to defend any referee who feels like this is a live match when I have a lot to focus on, and maybe that wasn't a thing that he individually was aware of going on. But there's constantly this sort of sense in Italy of the buck being passed to somebody else. So now it's the referees, going to want to pass the buck to the person in the stands who's in control of public order, saying, well, why isn't he stopping it? The person in control of public order says, well, the referee's got the first power to stop it. There's always somebody else who you can say should be taking responsibility for this. And the lack of clarity in those things is a part of the problem. But I think in the first instance, it's certainly clear that Lazio's supporters, again, this doesn't mean every single Lazio supporter is a racist or is guilty of racist chanting, but Lazio's support base has a consistent history of being involved in these sorts of incidents. And at that point, you do have to look at the club and say, well, what are you doing to stop it? No more who else can we blame? Who else could be responsible? Because sure, the referee could have suspended the game. The person in charge of public order could have taken different decisions. But what have Lazio actually done to stop this from happening? Because it keeps happening.
For more, sign up now for ESPN Plus.